Excelente. Hey, what you guys were listening to was Dallas 1 p.m. by Saxon. You know what? We want to welcome you to Second Look with Vinny and Jake. Hey, Vinny, how you doing?
Hey, Big Jake, how you doing? How's it going?
Great. Wait, you know what? Before I forget, today's Vinny's birthday. Happy birthday, big guy.
Thank you very much.
Is it bad to say how old you? I guess that's.
No. I'm proud of my age.
Are you?
Yes, I am. Today I'm 52 years old.
Wow, isn't it great to start off a new series on a birthday? I mean, 50.
Absolutely.
You'll always remember, right?
I got the juices flowing from the birthday party. The cake's still settling in my stomach.
Nice. All right. Excelente. So this is our inaugural episode for this series, and we're going to talk a little. It'd be a good idea, Vinny, to talk about what we're doing here. Probably a good idea, right?
So a second look is we're gonna take a look back at events that happened in history, and we're gonna maybe look at another angle or some information that maybe came up recently and not a lot of people are aware of, and we're gonna just take a look in there and see if we could if we discover anything or anything that's revealed to us that might not be in a high school textbook. Or that might not even be that very well known to the public in general. It might be just known to some historians, some elite historians that just write back and forth in journals to each other in a university, which that does happen a lot. A lot of that stuff doesn't trickle down, but that's what we're going to do. We're going to take a second look, and if there's things that were interesting, sometimes, like you said, sometimes that might be controversial. Sometimes it just might be kind of straightforward. But the point is to bring these certain things to light. A lot of times it'll have a message to what's going on in the world today and in our country. Not always, right? But this first inaugural episode is going to touch on it. Basically, it's directly involved with what's
the point
that we've come to today in history, right?
Yes, I'm glad you share that because this, today it has to, our episode. Well, let me just give the claim, and then let me share something about the claim. Our claim today, or Vinny did the research. And I'm going to talk with him about it. The claim is this: the CIA during the Cold War was corrupt. Now, there's a lot to that. Okay, that's a short sense. The CIA was during the Cold War was corrupt. But I want to share this: we're living in times today, 2021, where there's a lot of people, right, Vinny, who are not too happy with their government, who are questioning elections, who are questioning vaccines, who are questioning step A, all these things. And so we might want to ask ourselves, well, where did this begin? Now, I would argue, maybe even before the Cold War, right? But at least for sure, I think if we look at the Cold War and onward, we could see some things that happened, some activities that happened in the government where we could say, oh, wow, I could see why the people might be a little they might be questioning their government. So that's what we're doing today. And specifically, we're going to look at the Cold War era with the CIA. But we could also argue that we could go a little bit before that and afterwards.
Well, what's interesting about today's episode is that we're going to take a look. We're going to use the Kennedy assassination just as a window in, right? We're not necessarily talking about the assassination itself. We're using it as a window to jump into that little spot in history and start off with discussing two FBI memos that are very, very interesting.
I like that. Can we do that right now, Vinny? So again, our claim is the CIA during this Cold War was corrupt. So
corrupt.
What would be our first?
Let's mention as well. Mm-hmm. There's there in a couple episodes down the road there'll be part 2 follow-up to this that will explain more of the detail, because what we're trying to do is keep these episodes not too long, and there's quite a bit of information to share. So we're gonna do some highlights in this one, and then return to to fill in the details to solidify the point that we're trying to make.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Let's go ahead and talk to us about the first point to this. Why would we say that the CIA? Now, before I forget, at the end of the episode, we're going to see if Vinny was able to back up his claim. I'll give my point, and the audience you'll be able to share that as well in comments. But so, Vinny, when we're looking at this claim, the CIA during the Cold War was corrupt. Can you start me off with a point? I mean, what? So
there's always been a lot of speculation, conspiracy around the JFK assassination and the CIA, right? That's actually majority of the nation and in polls do believe that there was a conspiracy involving the CIA. As a matter of fact, in 1975-76, when the Church Committee did their investigations into the abuses of the CIA and the FBI and other agencies, their 2-volume report, right, found that there indeed was a conspiracy involving the CIA with the assassination of JFK. But the problem is that where it kind of stops. They can't provide any material substance or any names. All they could speak to is that there was a conspiracy, CIA was involved, other groups were involved, and that's kind of where they left it. So it's kind of like a, you know, kind of bring you up and maybe solve this thing, and then no, it doesn't, right? But that there's a congressional committee that investigated this and concluded that there was a conspiracy involving the CIA with JFK. So we could take that for what it is. As a matter of fact, that kind of serves as a kind of a supporting basis of evidence to start off with.
Sure.
Right?
So the Church Committee, which was a very well, respected committee, very famous, they basically said, you know what, there's some wrong going on in the CIA. Okay.
Well, it was the CIA, the FBI,
the IRS, all the intelligence agencies.
They looked at it. They looked at the whole thing. That's why there's two separate volumes, by the way. On that
right. Report. So now we have the Church Committee. Now, what else can we say that points a finger at the CIA as being corrupt during this time?
So this might be the most controversial part, but I guarantee you that we're going to be able to show that this is what's going on. So we're actually going to take a look at George Herbert Walker Bush, the vice president for 2 terms underneath Reagan, and then president after Reagan. So 12 years in the White House. A lot of people might not know this or might not remember, okay? But in the heels of the Church Committee, there was a big shakeup in the government. And it was the Ford administration at the time. And there's an event that's called the Halloween Massacre. And what happened was a huge shakeup because the CIA was put on notice. And so they kind of went into damage control. And so the CIA director was fired, and he was replaced by George H.W. Bush, tagged by Ford as the CIA director. Now we'll get back to why would George H.W. Bush be put in to run the CIA when, according to what the public knows, he has no intelligence background, no experience.
Sure.
Why would you put kind of like at that point in time, not very well known politician, a couple of failed Senate runs, like not very, right? Why would you put him in there? Donald Rumsfeld, who was chief of staff for Ford, is the Secretary of Defense is fired, and he's placed into the Secretary of Defense. And the deputy chief of staff for Rumsfeld was Dick Cheney, and Dick Cheney becomes chief of staff. Okay. Now there's other couple changes, but those are the significant ones that we want to look at, because people's memories might be jogged when you hear the name Donald Rumsfeld and Dick Cheney associated with a Bush, because it's going to be when the later Bush comes in as president, and his vice president is going to be Dick Cheney, and the Secretary of Defense is going to be Donald Rumsfeld. So the 2 memos that we are going to look at right now directly involve George H.W. Bush. Okay.
I'll put the first one up, Vinny. You can maybe give a little summary of it, right?
Okay. So this first document is dated November 29th, 1963. It's to the director of the Bureau of Intelligence and Research, and it's from J. Edgar Hoover, who was the FBI director. And basically what it discusses is there's an anti-Castro group in Miami, and there's some worry that because of the assassination of John F. Kennedy, that these guys might try to take on some unauthorized action against Castro in Cuba, because they think that the policy in the U.S. might change. The memo was pretty much stating that the policy is not going to change, and not all is okay. We haven't seen any plans of any unauthorized actions, and the 2 gentlemen at the bottom of the page or that are getting briefed on this. This is the memo that they're getting briefed on. One of those gentlemen is Mr. George Bush of the Central Intelligence Agency, right there at the bottom of the document. Okay, so let's talk about this for a second. This document was discovered in the library of the University of Southern California, San Bernardino, right? Investigative journalist was in there doing some work and unearthed this in about 1985. It doesn't see public light of day until about 1988, right about the time that Bush is getting ready to take the nomination for president, which of course we know he's going to become the president. So there was some scuffle about it. The guy
sounds like an October surprise, no? Like right. You know how they throw in these October things. Surprise.
And let me add this one before we go any farther forward. Russ Baker is the researcher that most of this argument is based on. This guy did a fantastic job putting a book out, researching a book. So we have to mention Russ Baker before we go any further, because we're in his territory right now.
Sure.
So because George Bush, they asked George Bush, was this you? Well, he said, no, that's not me. And generally the CIA doesn't give out any information about anything, right? We can neither confirm nor deny, but there is a story that comes out. And they say that, in fact, it is a different George Bush that was in the CIA at that time. And they even bring out a guy, they trump out a guy. The guy's name is Bush. Supposedly he worked for a very short time at the CIA at that point in time back then. Okay. Now, this guy, this George Bush, that's not President George Bush, was interviewed several times, right? He did the rounds. And he denies that he is the person that is briefed in this memo. That wasn't him. He had a low-level job at the CIA. He had nothing to do with any of this stuff, right? So we're left with Bush denying, and basically the CIA saying that's not George Bush. This is the George Bush that it was. And the George Bush that they're saying that it was is saying that was not me, right? Again, this is all in Russ Baker's really thick and heavily researched book, and we'll reference that later in the show notes.
Okay, should we go on to our
so now let's go to memo number 2, right?
Yeah. Give me one second.
So this document is declassified during the Clinton administration in 1993. Okay, and this is it's from Graham W. Kitchell, and the subject is unknown subject: assassination of President John F. Kennedy. So let me read just the first part here. At 1:45 p.m., Mr. George H.W. Bush, president of the Zapata Offshore Drilling Company, Houston, Texas, residence 3525 Briar, Houston, telephonically furnished the following information to writer by long-distance telephone call from Tyler, Texas. Bush stated that he wanted to be kept confidential, but wanted to furnish hearsay that he recalled hearing in recent weeks, the day and source unknown. He stated that one James Parrott has been talking of killing the president when he comes to Houston. So what this document is saying is that George H.W. Bush made a phone call about 1:45 p.m., which would be approximately 45 minutes to an hour after the assassination. He's calling from about 3 hours away, due south in Taylor, from Dallas. And he's calling the Houston Bureau of the FBI to give this tip. He names a guy, right, that is potentially could be a suspect in the Kennedy assassination, right? So
do you think it's a ruse though that he gave that name? Is this part of the game, or do you think he really believed that this was a possible,
Well, at this point, people are fair to like think either which way. Okay. But I can guarantee you that as we look a little bit further into this is George Bush. This time that there's no mistaking. It's George H.W. Bush, who is the president of Zapata Offshore Drilling, and that's exactly who the guy is, right?
Sure.
That's him.
You're connecting the business to the man, and the man was the president.
When asked about this, he says he doesn't remember making the phone call. Now, mind you, when he's questioned about these things, it's not him giving the answers. He has people that give the answers. The Bushes were very, very famous, at least George H.W. Bush was, of keeping a very private life, right? I don't know if you can attest to that or not, Jake, based on just your general knowledge, but there wasn't a lot known about him, and they didn't want to make a lot known. So when questions like these arise, Bush is the one who's he's not doing the answering. He's answering through his people, and in this case, it's the White House.
What we know more about is his family, the death of his daughter, his failed Senate runs, but anything about the CIA, which you made a point before. It's starting to make sense why he became director of the CIA, since he
one interesting point
worked for the CIA, right?
Right. One interesting point to that is when asked about this in the 1990s, right? He says that he never worked for the CIA. Well, whoa. Did you forget that you were the director of the CIA for a whole year in 1975 to 1976? Right. He didn't quite make that clear, right? So when he says that he never worked for the CIA, well, we know for a fact this is, he was the director of the CIA under the Ford administration for a year.
Yeah. Isn't it true though, also when they asked him about where he was during Kennedy's assassination, he doesn't remember?
Right. And again, Russ Baker really makes this a point of all his presentations, right? When asked where he was on the day of the JFK assassination, he has no answer. He does not remember where he was, and he does not remember what he was doing. Okay. That's his answer. That's not my answer or Russ Baker's answer. Okay. So that's interesting all on its own, because I would think that if I made a phone call to the FBI to give him a hot tip of somebody that I might think have been involved with the assassination of the president, and I gave my name, I think I might remember making that phone call.
Especially the day the president died.
Yeah, and on
in your state.
Right. Well, on that day I made that phone call because the president was assassinated, and here I was in Taylor when I made that phone call.
Yeah.
So
a little fishy there.
Little fishy.
Are we? Do you have another memo, or is that the only memo for this? So
before we jump to the last memo, let's just point out real quick that I debated long and hard on how to present this to the audience, because the point of our show is to give clear and precise evidence for the case that we're trying to make. And I may not always get it right. I think I got it right this time, but I may not always get it right. And the audience may be fair enough to say that I didn't get it right.
Well, these memos are declassified. I mean, they're not classified anymore. I mean, they're open to the public.
What we're going to do to kind of fill in the support to show that this is the George H.W. Bush, who is in the CIA, and of course, who made that phone call. Okay. Well, we shouldn't say in the CIA, but working with or for the CIA. What the key point of this, the whole thing, is George Bush's father, Prescott Bush, because Prescott Bush was involved with the Harriman brothers, and history teachers out there, you know who the Harriman brothers are. This is one of the robber baron empires, right? That's taught in the textbook in the progressive era, right at the beginning of the century. Okay, and also the both Dulles brothers. And everyone should know that in 1952, when the Eisenhower administration comes into power, Allen Dulles is the CIA director, and Foster Dulles is the Secretary of State. Okay, that's going to be important.
Powerful brothers, but maybe the most powerful brothers in history.
And the Harrimans, the Harriman Empire, railroads, transportation, shipping, banking. I mean, the Harrimans are. That's why they're the robber barons, just like the Rockefellers.
Yeah.
Your J.P. Morgans. That's why they are in the textbook. We're going to make a little bit of a side argument here that maybe Prescott Bush and his father-in-law, George Herbert Walker, should have been in the textbooks as well, because these guys are like the four horsemen, because Prescott Bush and his father-in-law are both partners in the Harriman Company, the big conglomerate, right? Okay. So we're going to go back in time, and then a little bit farther back in time, and then we're going to come back after the assassination to kind of fill in just a couple of little holes that might help us answer why George H.W. Bush was tapped as a CIA director by Ford in 1975. Because I believe that we can make much more sense of the reasons why he was, because the evidence to this date is he's just a politician with no intelligence background. And the White House is scrambling, right? It's damage control because of the Church Committee report. Why do you put this guy in charge of the CIA, in charge of cleanup, basically, right, is what's going on. We're going to fill that in, and I think we're going to be able to show everybody that why he was tapped in the CIA, and the fact that he was affiliated with the CIA going as far back as maybe when he was a teenager. Because let's make one more point here very clear. Prescott Bush was graduated from Yale and was Skull and Bones. George H.W. Bush graduated from Yale and was Skull and Bones. And the most recent President Bush graduated from Yale and was Skull and Bones. Both Harriman brothers, one of them graduating with Prescott Bush, Yale grads, Skull and Bones. So,
and if the audience doesn't know, what's the Skull and Bones?
So, Skull and Bones is a secret society that's based inside Yale. You have to be, you basically have to be tapped to get into it, right? You don't get to volunteer or anything like that.
Right.
And what it really is it is a society that is basically grooming the elites to fill in positions in government, in industry, in banking, the Supreme Court. It's a pool for people that they're trying to promote as a network into the most powerful positions in the government and in industry and in economics, basically for the purpose to try to, manipulate the whole thing. Why do you create a secret society and try to promote people through these networks? Because the money is always flowing, right? Yeah. And the legacies is a lot of times it's the son of this person, the son of that person. It's like legacy, right? So Skull and Bones is very, very important. It might, even if it's not as big a deal today, at that point in time, we're going to show that it was a major, major big deal, right? Because these guys are the titans of the American century, the beginning of the American century. These guys are putting it on the map, and they're doing it in a big, big way. Okay.
So what's our next point?
So we're going to take a look. We're going to go back to 1953. Now, in 1953 is when George H.W. Bush gets his first job. And who's giving that to him is Neil Mallon. Neil Mallon is the guy that's been running, the chairman of Dresser Industries, which was the Harriman Brothers company, bought way back in like 1920, or maybe somewhere in the 1920s. Right, we can return to that date later. But that's and so Prescott Bush put his friend and fellow Yale grad and fellow Skull and Bones buddy Neil Mallon. Okay, Neil Mallon, another Skull and Bones member, right? Neil Mallon is running Dresser Industries, and Neil Mallon's going to give one of his good friends his son's first job, and he's going to invest in 1953 in Zapata oil. Okay, so in 1953, when Bush is and he's getting the money together, and he's got a group together, and he's investing. Part of that group, right? The Lytle brothers, I believe their last name is. These are going to be the guys that are the founders of Pennzoil. And another man that's involved in here is Thomas J. Devine. And this is where we're going to go to our third memo, because we got something to say about Thomas J. Devine. Let's pop that memo up.
All right, give me 1 second. Okay, let me share the screen.
So this is a memorandum for DO security. Subject, Thomas James Devine. And this is dated 30 January 1968. Subject is a former agency staff employee who resigned in 1953 to go into private business. A CSA was arranged, DO division, on 12 June 1963 for use of subject in Project WhoWhatWhy operations. Since this time, he has been used as a cleared and witting commercial asset under Project WhoWhatWhy. He has proved to be most competent and trustworthy. The memo is going to go on to state Thomas J. Devine is given secret status because he went in 1967. He makes a trip with Bush to the Vietnam and Bush requested him to go with him, right? So this is Bush's business partner from 1953 who's going in with him on Zapata Oil Company. He is CIA. It states that he resigned from the CIA to go into private business, but as you can see, as you read further through the memo, he's actually acting in a capacity and still informing. He still has top secret security clearance. His identity is top secret, right? It doesn't come out for a little while that this is one of George Bush's partners, right? So this guy, they're oil wildcats, right? They're wildcatting is what it was. I guess that was kind of like
that was the term,
right? So CIA direct business partner and wildcatter along with George H.W. Bush. Now moving up, George is going to sell off his part of the company in 1966, and that's when his political career is going to begin. Okay, but if we take it back down to about 1960, let's understand that at the time, Alan Dulles' CIA is running a pilot operation in the Caribbean. Okay, and this is going to lead up to the Bay of Pigs invasion, but this is all the preparation for the overthrow of Castro. Right, this was a plot that was hatched under Eisenhower. Right, so the reason why Kennedy even lets it go on as it was because it was started under Eisenhower. But what's going to happen in the end is Kennedy is not going to provide the air support that they need, because Kennedy starts smelling that there's something rotten in Denmark. And so the obviously we know all of us, anybody who knows their history knows that the Bay of Pigs invasion was a disaster, a humiliation on our country, a humiliation to Alan Dulles and the CIA. They took it personal, right? The war between the CIA and Kennedy is very well known, and intensified, because what JFK is going to do? He's going to fire Alan Dulles. He's going to fire the architect of the CIA from his baby that he created. The whole community is not going to be happy about this. He's also going to fire Dulles' sister from her role, and that's going to be for our later part. But the Harriman have a sister, and the Dulles have a sister that play a major role in the Marshall Plan in Europe, the rollout in economics and all and what have you. Foreign policy, right? Foreign policy is one of the focuses that we want, the overarching theme that we want to look at when we're talking about this. So Bush has oil rigs, Zapata oil drilling. There's a few offshoots, right? There's a couple of subsidiaries that break off. So they have drilling rigs that are in the Gulf of Mexico, in the Caribbean, over in the Persian Gulf. There are a couple of others around the world. And what's going on down in these oil rigs is the CIA is training Cuban nationals, right? And so it's understood that the way it's working is that there's a list that's presented to, and maybe it's George H.W. Bush or not, maybe it's but of who they want employed. And so the people that are employed on the rigs, right, is how they officially get on there, and that's how they're facilitating the training of the Cuban nationals.
So these are the Cuban nationals are working on these oil rigs, and
correct. Well, they say they're working on them, right? But that's the cover.
But they were being trained to go back to Cuba.
And we know there's no dispute, there's no argument.
No,
we know
that's
that we were training Cuban nationals to invade Cuba to overthrow Castro.
That was never disputed. Yeah,
there's never a dispute about that.
No.
So we're going to end with this part of the history, right? And now comes a kind of a crucial part. We're going to go back to 1900. And what I'm going to do for the audience and for you, Jake, here is I just have a list of like highlights, of bullet points. Okay. I'm only going to provide the highlights for George Herbert Walker, Prescott Bush, both Harriman brothers, and both Dulles brothers. And of course, this is not even close to everything that they're involved in. I only pretty much kind of go up to a certain point. That's more information that's going to be left for part 2, because these gentlemen are involved in everything, right? Okay. So this is just going to rattle off just like one after another, okay? Go for it. So in 1900, George Herbert Walker started a banking and investment firm, G.H. Walker and Company. Okay, 1900. That's the father-in-law of Prescott Bush, grandfather of George H.W. Bush. 1919, George Herbert Walker is going to become the president of W.A. Harriman and Company with Averell Harriman. That's the older Harriman brother. Okay. By 1920, the Harriman Company is taking control of Hamburg America Line. It's a shipping line that's connected with the German Tyson family, Tyson Steel. The Harriman. Let's make this clear to begin. The Harriman brothers firm, besides the rest of their empire, right? Railroads, banking, transportation. It's a massive empire. But their firm that they're connected with here, they're investment bankers. And so what they're doing is investing wealthy Americans' capital, right? And they're investing into Germany, steel, coal, pharmaceutical, IG Farben, right? So there's a network that's kind of set up, and that's what these guys are doing. So in 1927, the company is renamed Harriman Brothers and Company, and Walker's son Prescott Bush is made vice president. Okay, and then in 1931, it's going to be the final merger. They merge with another investment banking firm, like one of the oldest banking firms in the United States. So now it's the 1931 is the full big merge. It is Brown Brothers, Harriman and Company. Okay, Brown Brothers, Harriman and Company. And so at this time, we have another person who's brought in as a senior partner. His name is Robert Lovett. He happens to be the son of Robert Lovett, who is the CEO of Union Pacific Railroad, right? Union Pacific Railroad is Harriman, right? Roland Harriman is the chairman of Union Pacific Railroad for about 23 years. That's one of his roles, right? That's the brother that Bush graduated with from Yale. And yes, Robert Lovett is also skull and bones. And he will have a distinguished career. And in 1945, it'll be the Lovett Commission, right, that looks at the intelligence world and basically hatches the CIA. So Lovett plays a major role in the creation of the CIA later on down the line. Skull and bones. So now that's just the highlights of the Harriman Brothers. Okay. There's plenty of more stuff that these guys are at most of the they're at all the conferences in World War II, the secret conferences, Yalta. Averell Harriman, he's at the Treaty of Versailles.
They're at attendance. You're saying they're in attendance.
In attendance. They're actually lawyers for the. They're writing up the language in the treaties.
Okay.
And the Dulles brothers are involved in the same manner, right? They're there representing the government as diplomats. They're helping to create the treaties, literally. So these guys are doing the business on this side, running their empire, and they're working for the government, laying down the tracks for these treaties, right? World War I and World War II. So now the Dulles brothers, Foster Dulles, legal counsel to the United States delegation to the Versailles Peace Conference, where he served under his uncle, Secretary of State Robert Lansing. He served as a member of the War Reparations Committee at Wilson's request. He was also an early member, along with future First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt, of the League of Free Nations Association, founded in 1918 and after 1923 known as the Foreign Policy Association, which supported American membership in the League of Nations. As a partner in Sullivan and Cromwell, Dulles expanded on his late grandfather's Foster's expertise, specializing in international finance. He played a major role in designing the Dawes Plan, which reduced German reparations payments and temporarily resolved the reparations issue by having American firms lend money to German states and private companies. Under that compromise, the money was invested and the profits sent as reparations to Britain and France, which used the funds to repay their own war loans from the US. It's funny how that works out. In the 1920s, Dulles would be involved in setting up $1 billion worth of these loans. Chairman of the board for the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, trustee of the Rockefeller Foundation from 1935 to 1952. Dulles was also a founding member of the Foreign Policy Association and the Council on Foreign Relations, which to this day, the Council on Foreign Relations is one of the major things that a lot of researchers look at as far as affecting foreign policy. The major think tank that pretty much some say run the government, right? Or at least direct the government in as far as policy goes. Foster Dulles. Oh, I'm sorry, Allen Dulles. 1915, Robert Lansing, okay, Secretary of State, same uncle, right? Employs his nephew Allen Dulles to Nicaragua to stir up support for the war efforts. So he's already down there talking to different leaders. They're trying to get him to cut off Germany. So they're already stirring the war effort. He was assigned to the American delegation at the Paris Peace Conference along with his older brother. From 1922 to 1926, he served 5 years as chief of the Near East Division of the Department of State. Also during the late 1920s and early 1930s, he served as legal advisor to the delegations on arms limitation at the League of Nations. In 1926, he joined Sullivan and Cromwell with his brother. He became the director of the Council on Foreign Relations in 1927, the first new director since the Council's foundation in 1921. He was the Council's secretary from 1933 to 1944. Dulles was recruited into the Office of Strategic Services by William J. Donovan in October 1941. And history teachers should know this, but those who don't know this, the OSS is a preceder to the CIA. The OSS was our secret service intelligence.
Right.
Right. And then just let me wrap this up really quick.
Yeah. So go ahead.
Oh, actually, that's pretty good. Now, again, these are just some of the highlights. But the point I'm trying to make here, and the connections we're trying to make here, is Prescott Bush, his father, is in the middle with all these other members, and the Dulleses are not skull and bones, but they're major players. Just giving you the highlights of some of their posts lets you know how much they're involved in the government. Sullivan and Cromwell is their firm. That firm is an international law firm. So what's going on is a lot of the Harriman brothers' clients, right, are legally represented by Sullivan and Cromwell, the Dulles brothers. And the Dulles brothers and the Harrimans and Prescott come into close contact 1930s, because there's going to be congressional investigations as Hitler's getting worse and worse leading up towards World War II. We're trading with Germany, right? Everything's going really beautiful with Germany. Hitler's on the Time magazine cover, I think, about 6 times. Things are great with Germany until Hitler starts taking things south. So a lot of people didn't want to disrupt the billions and billions of dollars that are being made going back and forth, right? And that's what the Harrimans are doing. They're investing the capital into Germany, and so it's a big deal. When it gets too close, though, now they're dealing with the Nazis. Okay, right. So now they actually have to hire Dulles to come in and help mask their operation from the government, because they're dealing with, at this point, they're dealing with Nazis, right? And so obviously it's going to look bad in the United States if we're doing business with the enemy. And in 1942, just to finish this off right here, in 1942, Union Banking Corp, which was the banking firm that was created in 1922, run by Prescott Bush and his father-in-law, as part of the banking network with in Germany and Dutch banking, and that was with the Tyson family, and then another German steel and coal family. Okay, that's just two of their clients. Okay, we're looking at a very little bit of what these guys are really actually into. So that their bank is seized by the U.S. government in 1942. Prescott Bush and the Harriman brothers are on the board of directors of that bank. Okay, and Dulles does whatever he does, and when the war's over, there's no consequences, nothing ever said about anything. The bank goes back to the Harrimans, and all is good. All right, that's just the end of story. Okay, now that's going to close out giving some background information when we're talking about the Harriman brothers, the Dulles brothers, and George Herbert Walker, which is Prescott Bush's father-in-law. Prescott Bush is up to his neck with the Harriman brothers in their firm, with his father-in-law, and with the Dulles brothers, right? Before 1950, it was spanning about 30 years. About 30 years at this point, as we're coming up to the Eisenhower administration, is these relationships that are business and they personal, secret society relationships, right? These are the movers and shakers that are going to lead us up to the 1950s and our next phase that we're going to look at.
So let's summarize here. So because our claim was the CIA was corrupt during the Cold War, and
correct.
Hopefully there's history teachers who are watching this, and they could definitely get our citations that we're going to have at the end, because we cover that as history teachers. We cover the Cold War. We cover the assassination of Kennedy during the Cold War. We cover the relationship between the two. And even the CIA was created in 1947 by, I think we mentioned, by Harry Truman. So what I got out of this episode, and we're going to vote here, audience, regarding the CIA being corrupt. We had the Church report that basically said they were corrupt of all their investigating. And you brought up some memos by really lining up Bush being part of the CIA after, for many, many years, saying he wasn't part of it, even though he becomes director, in the 70s under Ford. So with that argument, I believe you're basically saying is that it's they're kind of covering themselves, right? They have these three families that. Go ahead.
Right. Okay. Well, let me close out. If we're going to close it out here, let's cut it off by introducing the Eisenhower administration.
Yeah.
Both Dulles brothers, Prescott and his father-in-law, and now George H.W. Bush are all working on his campaign. Right? They fought hard to get him in office, and they're all rewarded. This is when Allen Dulles is appointed CIA director.
Right.
Foster Dulles is appointed Secretary of State, and Prescott Bush becomes a senator now from Connecticut. So these men, when you look back at in the textbooks, this is probably when you're going to get your first mention of Prescott Bush, that he's a senator in 1952 from Connecticut. But Prescott Bush has been right in the middle of this thing, going all the way back to the 1920s, right? When he comes up with his father-in-law in the Harriman brothers firm. So there's still a little bit left. We're going to save that for part 2, okay? But the point we're making is that I want to make is the CIA does not do what they do. They're not able to do what they did during the Cold War. If not for these gentlemen and others, right, creating the foreign policy situation, setting up everything, because it's what's going on in the CIA, right, is the same business as usual that's going on the 50 previous years before. We have titans that are involving ourselves in foreign policy, economics, right? When the CIA comes in, and we'll give 2 quick examples as well of the conflict of interest that's been going on the whole time, and exactly how the CIA operating is exactly how these guys are operating. The overthrow of Guatemalan president in 53, and the overthrow of the Iranian president in 54. United Fruit in Guatemala, the president was trying to nationalize their lands and take them away from United Fruit. United Fruit, huge, big company, right? Monopoly, right? Who's their? They're the clients of Sullivan and Cromwell. Okay, so when Sullivan and Cromwell's Allen Dulles. So when Allen Dulles becomes a CIA director, the first thing he does for his client at Sullivan and Cromwell is go down and overthrow the president of Guatemala. Same situation in Iran. The president Mossadegh, he's trying to nationalize the oil fields, right? Because the British are taking all that for themselves. British Petroleum, not quite named British Petroleum at that specific time, but that name is going to change to British Petroleum. Clients of Sullivan and Cromwell. So these are 2 great examples of the serious conflict of interest that's going on with what the CIA is going to be right off the bat, right? These 2 successful operations, really, everyone's really excited and happy about this whole thing. Of course, if you look at international law, they're illegal operations, right? We're not allowed to go over and overthrow governments. We're not allowed to do that.
So that's a major point, because I would say the Church Report's big. The overthrowing governments by the CIA, it's pretty dirty.
Assassination
attempts on Castro.
Interventions,
right.
Everything. Right?
So these are all big points. I think the point regarding these families, I think you sharing that, continuing, I think it just seems to be like politics as usual in a way, which is not good. But
right.
And how and tell me if I'm wrong here, how it influenced the CIA to kind of do some of their behavior, right? Regarding the overthrows and who was in charge at this time. We have people like Bush involved and the Dulles brothers who are running the CIA and the government, State Department. So
when you're Allen Dulles and you already have a network that's already set up and it's international, right? The CIA, what they do is they use companies as fronts for their operations, and a lot of these companies are legitimate. Some of them are not, but most of them are actually legitimate companies. And so their reach, their tentacles are spread across the globe because of the previous 50 years of what the Harriman brothers and the Dulles brothers and others, right? That's not the only firms that are going on. These guys, at the time, these guys are like the Wall Street killers. Like today, it's who's the Wall Street killer today? Saks, Fifth Avenue, or Goldman, or whatever.
Goldman Sachs,
Goldman Sachs. Those are the guys that we know today are like the heavyweights on Wall Street. Back in that day, the Wall Street heavyweights were the Harriman brothers and Prescott Bush.
There you go. So before we talk about our song, because we're going to want to throw a piece of music so we can share with our students, kind of tying in the topic of the Cold War. And within the Cold War, we had the assassination of John F. Kennedy. The piece of music that we heard in the beginning of this episode, Dallas 1 p.m., right, by Saxon. Liddy's going to go ahead and share the lyrics. But before you do that, Liddy, I have to vote on your, I think you gave us some good arguments in the beginning and the end. I think the middle, it was a little muddled regarding all these players, because you get lost in it a little bit. However,
Correct.
I think
that's why we need the part 2.
That's what I'm saying. I think because of the part 2. So I have to hold my judgment until the part 2.
Okay, that's fair enough.
But I do see. I mean, when you bring in the church report, you bring in all these assassinations that took place under the CIA and hush hush, and who were the players, and you brought up some of the players, the Dulles brothers, the Harrimans, who were always involved in everything, and of course the Bushes. But that being said, are we ready for a song that we can share with our kids when we hit this period?
Let us say that because of copyright reasons, we can't actually play the song. We were able to play a little blip of it at the beginning of the episode. So right. What I'm gonna try to do is just give a kind of a dramatic reading, or maybe a half attempt effort at singing the lyrics. So just so people get a feel of how the song goes.
Go for it.
So if you remember the beginning of it has a real kind of like so it has kind of that really like that bass undertone going to it, right? Down on Main Street, the scene was set. They check out the fuel, turn the radio on, open the gates, assemble the gun, wait at the red for the president's run. The world was shocked that fateful day. A young man's life was blown away, yay, yay. Dallas, 1 p.m. Dun, 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 right? Right and left. No, in the back of the head, those aren't the correct lyrics, Jake. Screaming confusion. Sorry. Shots rip the air. Cadillac racing. Cops on the run. They couldn't believe the president's hit. And then there's a breakdown in the song with a little light guitar overtone. And they're actually giving actual audio of the reports going on. It's right down there at the scene. All the confusion. The guy on the radio is talking over, and we don't know what's going on, what's happening. Then it goes in the next verse is the shooting stunned. And the assassins run. Is he dead? No one will say. Around the world, the news was flashed. We sat and watched your tragic history. The world was shocked that fateful day. A young man's life was blown away. Dallas, 1 p.m. And then the song kind of like fades out with that with a few more.
There you go. No, I like that. Thank you for sharing that. Hey, listen, you guys, we want to appreciate you listening on, and even hitting this period of the Cold War. It's just so much information, so much, and that's
why we're going to return to it, and we're not going to return to it immediately. Right. We already have a couple of things lined up for the. Should we give a little teaser of what's the next episode?
Maybe time period. Let's do that. That's
okay,
a teaser.
Okay, ancient history.
Okay, so we're going from Cold War to ancient history, which is more your forte, right? Your forte is more ancient history. So there you go, y'all. I have a little southern accent there.
Okay, well, we're talking about Texas, right?
There you go. I had to go there. So, hey, thank you for joining us with Second Look, and we'll be coming back at you very soon. Have yourself
Thank you very much, Jake.
Bye, Vinny.